Hi, everybody. My name is Amber Samdahl, and I am the Director of Design and Innovation at PBS Wisconsin, and also part of the Public Media Innovators Group, alongside my colleague Chad Davis. And we're really excited to welcome special guests today and to be, sharing this webinar in collaboration with the Marketing Communications PLC as well. A big thanks to NITA for all their support of our groups and our webinars. And without further ado, I am just going to hand it over to Eric Ernst, who will continue the introduction of the webinar.
Thank you, Amber. Hi, everybody. I am Eric Ernst. I'm a public relations director at Wisconsin Public Media, so I work closely with Amber and her colleagues. And I'm also the chair of the NITA Marketing and Communications Peer Learning Community. All of us in the Marketing and Communications PLC are just so grateful to be collaborating with our innovators colleagues on this webinar. Any of you who have attended an innovators webinar before know that they set the bar for what these events should be like. And so anytime that we have the chance to cooperate and collaborate, we are really grateful for that. So thank you, Amber, and all of the innovators for allowing us to do so. This webinar is going to offer some real life examples of how colleagues across the system are working with what have become known as influencers or have created their own influencers through their digital work. Um, we invite you to watch for more webinars from both of our PLCs on this and other topics that affect all of our work. So reach out to either of us with ideas on how those opportunities can best serve your work, because that's the main goal of NITA and especially the PLC groups. Today, we expect there to be many questions on this topic and these experiences and opportunities, and we welcome those in the chat. We will be collecting them and getting to as many of them as possible at the conclusion of the presentations. We were hoping and planning to have three presenters today, but unfortunately, one of our presenters is ill and was not able to make it today. So, if anybody, as you go along and you hear from our two presenters, and you're inspired to raise your hand and say that you have an example that you would love to share, Amber is willing to give it the old college try on a new to us Zoom um, tool that would allow us to bring someone out from the participation pool at the end of the presentations to share yours as well. So please signify that in the chat if you would be interested in sharing an example from your work as well. And so, without any, and thank you, Amber. Yes, Amber also shared the link to WYPR's work that they were going to present on today. There's a really nice current article about that as well. So, without any further ado, I am going to introduce first Mike Shea, who is also a member of the Marketing and Communications PLC and is a communications specialist in Dayton, Ohio, with our friends at Think TV and CET. Is that correct, Mike?
That's correct.
Awesome. Thank you. Take it away.
Thanks, guys. Yeah. Hi, my name is Mike Shea. Like Eric said, I'm here in Dayton, Ohio with Think TV as well as with CET in Cincinnati. I handle our social media as well as podcast production and other digital content things as well. One of the main things I wanted to talk about today is the I know the whole thing is called myths and truths of social media influencers and working with influencers, but I really wanted to get into the myths and truths part specifically because that's been a big thing for us here at our station. When the questions have come up of social media lingo, uh, you know, every once in a while you hear somebody call it tic tac and you try really hard not to roll your eyes, but when we hear the term influencer, immediately it makes us feel icky. It conjures images of TikTok videos that are just poorly disguised ads and people selling products they don't use, the knee-jerk reaction of, oh my God, get a real job. We've all had that thought at some point. Literally at least once. But I think the thing we need to remember is that, the term influencer is in and of itself, I mean, like, all words are made up, but it is truly a made up word. It is something, it is a label that we slapped on something. And because it was the best we had at the time, and unfortunately it just stuck. The entire thing kind of showed up overnight, and so we've been trying to kind of define it ever since. Um, here at Think TV, we've come to look at influencers specifically as like modern day guerrilla marketing. Um, when you kind of boil them down to their bare parts, they're people who are having to learn constantly evolving platforms and algorithms. Your average social media app, the user interface changes once every few months, and you're having to learn to adapt to new features and new things. They're having to learn about creating and editing content on the fly, understanding branding and tone, reading audience behavior in real time, and adjusting strategy on the fly. And a lot of the times we think, well, these people in general, they might not have had a job in marketing or gone to school for marketing, but they have those those skills in them almost naturally, instinctively, in a way that maybe they don't realize what the kind of skill they have, because maybe they didn't get that opportunity, or maybe they did. Everyone's different, but most of them are completely doing all of that on their own. And that's the thing. Like, we're doing all those things in our stations with whole teams. At our station here, we've got me handling social media, one person handling web, one person handling graphic design, one person handling video. A lot of times these are one person armies with no budget, no safety net. They're kind of building the plane while they're flying it, as it were. But also, influencers themselves aren't just marketing tools. They are the people. They are the people embedded in our communities. They are seeing things from a ground level. They're communicating things in a way that feels natural to their audience, but they build trust because they're a part of the audience that they're marketing to. In return, they give us something incredibly valuable, which is a direct line to what people are thinking, feeling, responding to. It's not like a focus group. It's real time. Like, this is what people are thinking, feeling in this moment. So how this applies to us, is especially here in Dayton and Cincinnati, has been a couple different ways. So one of the things we've done in the last couple of years are these events called Gin and Baking. We have a local program here called Stephanie's Baking Journal, or Stephanie's Recipe Journal, which was originally called the Baking Journal. It was a web-based show, became a broadcast show. And then there is a local social media influencer group called Gintellectuals, that's all about gin and cocktails and spirits and things in the area. And one of the hosts of that, AJ, is a member of our board, and the idea was brought together by our old event planning, our old events manager, to get people together for baking and a day of a cooking demo and cocktail demos. And by partnering with him, being a member of our board, it avoided the discussion of, do we get a ticket? Do we give a cut of the tickets or things like it made that conversation a lot less messy. And it also really just kind of strengthened that community relationship, that it gave authenticity to the experience. Another example, and it also just made it kind of more of a strategic partnership in a way. Another example was when we had the America's Test Kitchen crew coming through for the 25th anniversary. We invited local food and culture influencers, bloggers. At the time, one of our local bakeries had a massive blow up on social media, so we invited some of their baking staff to come check it out, and they came to the cooking demos during the day. They came to the big event at the university later in the evening, and that was simply just all that really cost us was a couple of tickets each, and in return, we got publicity, we got visibility on social algorithms, and again, we increased community connections, we increased relationships within the area. Very low cost investment. And now where it works internally for us is kind of when you're on your social media marketing team, we are influencers, from a sort of a corporate maybe perspective. But whether we like the label or not, like, if you look like Jobs Explained, like, at its core, that is a grant funded initiative to literally take people and train them to be jobs market focused social media influencers on platforms like TikTok and Instagram Reels, but just addressing real world workforce issues while also following the trends of where the audience is. That's influencer strategy 101, and it works. We've proven it here with our own Jobs Explained program here in Southwest Ohio. Josie Massett, who is the person that we have on our team for that, she recently led a virtual healthcare career fair that reached over 6,000 students live online and then on the rewatch afterwards, that featured major public figures, including the governor of the state of Ohio, as well as industry professionals taking questions and answering questions. Like, that's impact, that's reach, and that's influence. But then even beyond the big initiatives, when you look just even more internally, what we're doing every day just to promote ourselves internally, like, we show up on social platforms. We are there to capture attention and keep audiences engaged and build trust and, encourage continued support. That's influencer work. We just don't always call it that because, we call it promotions, we call it marketing, we call it what we call it. So where the myth in all of this is the myth is that, influencers are shallow, unserious, somehow less legitimate. But the truth in all of that is they're honestly adapting faster than most industries are. Um, they are they understand audience behavior in a way that traditional systems are still catching up to, and they're reaching audiences that, we at PBS stations are still trying to figure out how to reach on a bigger scale. Public media has always kind of had to fight to prove its relevance in a way since its beginning. We go all the way back to the Mr. Rogers testimony video that we've all seen. There was a time when publicly available television itself was kind of dismissed and criticized in the same way, and it still is. So this is something that we ourselves are used to. So how do we stay relevant in the changing landscape the same way? Well, this is kind of that opportunity. If we want, younger, more modern audiences, we're going to have to meet them where they are. And right now they're on platforms that are shaped by influencers. So instead of writing them off just because the label feels uncomfortable, we need to be looking at what they actually do. Because when you do, you realize they're solving a lot of the same problems that we're trying to solve. They're answering a lot of the same questions we are, filling a lot of the same voids. They're just doing it differently, And I think instead of, dismissing it as sometimes is easy to do, I think there's an opportunity to learn from it, to collaborate with it, and evolve alongside it. At the end of the day, I think the question really anymore isn't whether or not influencers are valid. I think it's just, are we willing to adapt in the same ways that they already are? So that's my spiel.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. And we've got people, as you have questions, please enter them into the chat, and we will come back around after our next presenter and go through some of those questions that we've received. But before that, it's a good segue because our next presenter is Matthew Baltzell from Idaho PBS, who works directly in the Jobs Explained place. And for those of us who have either heard Matthew's colleagues talk about his work, or those in Idaho, they know that he is an influencer. And so, Matthew, without any further ado, thank you for joining us today for this presentation.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, my name's Matthew. Um, it's very funny getting called an influencer. I remember when I first got hired to my Idaho Public Television, there was a point where someone came around and was like, okay, so we have business cards. Every new employee gets business cards. What's your title? And I just sort of sat there as like, what is my job? I am technically an influencer. I feel cringy putting that on a business card. I'm not really a digital media manager. I honestly don't really remember even what it said. I think I just made up a complex series of words and nouns and I just handed it to people. But it is speaking to the fact that it is a very interesting position to be in. So, as actually great that you sort of led me in by talking about the Jobs Explained program through American Graduates. That is how I initially got hired. I am someone with actually a performing arts background, theater. I've been to did comedy, did acting, did a lot of writing, and then sort of did a lot of. It's very funny. I think I actually came here because and got hired onto the Jobs Exclaim project from my local station because I had a I guess I don't know. I love hearing my own voice. I was narcissistic enough, I guess, to say, yeah, let's film me. So what I did was with the program, as many of you know, is that it is a collective of different PBS stations across the country that would essentially have someone who was an influencer for different industries. And the goal was to put these videos that they would make about either the aerospace industry or the healthcare industry, or mine was the construction industry out in Idaho. And that we would film these videos for YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikTok. Although I will say there's for Idaho, and I know there's a couple other stations out there. TikTok got very quickly banned by all government employees, so we did have to pivot a little bit. I'm very curious if that'll change, but I doubt it. But anyway, the purpose was to reach younger audiences because there had been great versions of this program that had gone out on broadcast television that was really well done. It just simply was the fact that there wasn't a lot of, 16-year-olds tuning into Antiques Roadshow. And I don't say that in a bad way. I think as a 16-year-old, I watched Antiques Roadshow, but we were really successful, I think, before at getting the parents and the grandparents of our intended audience, which I still will say is incredibly important because those people still have conversations with their kids and their grandkids. But as far as reaching the actual intended audience of young adults that this program was aimed for in getting them aware of different job opportunities, we were just missing the mark. So the focus on this time around was incorporating this new media, which is always a term I find very funny because my family had the internet in 1995. This is 30 years and it's now still considered new media. But it also speaks to the fact that I do one of the myths I also just sort of wanted to bring up front is that the idea of using the internet, using YouTube, using these platforms is only good for reaching young adults. It's funny now that the internet has been around for such a long time that we now have social media platforms that we kind of mentally block in our head as that's the old person's social media. That's the young in our mind, we kind of oh, Facebook, that's for boomers, and Instagram's for millennials, and TikTok's for Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and we'll just forget Gen X like we always do. But I think that would be the one thing is that we actually have a lot of engaged people on a lot of different platforms, and you can actually reach a lot of different sorts of people, not just young adults. And also, the other sort of myth that Mike was great at pointing out was we also sometimes like to shy away from creating content for the short form video platforms because we think of it as shallow. We think of it as, the reason why I think we all cringe at the idea of the word influencer is it by its own name sounds very deceptive. I think the name sounds manipulative because you think oh, I'm just here to manipulate you. I'm not a journalist. I'm not an artist. I'm just here to influence you to do something against your will. I think that's what we have is sort of in the back of our head why we kind of have this fear of thinking like that. But we don't necessarily have to create content that is, malicious. I really love the work of the Jobs Explain program. I love the work that I see in a lot of different places because it really does reach people with the sort of programming content and art that really does matter to people in a space that does matter. There are people who I think one of the things that really struck me is that I think more and more, you talk to younger folk, is that if they go to a different city, instead of going on to Google to search, like, what restaurant should I go to? What cool things should I do when I'm in Chicago, when I'm in LA? They go on TikTok and they search the restaurants because they want to see that sort of visual content. They want to actually see and experience and hear from other people who experience it. And I really love the idea that you can bring that sort of thing to any sort of educational content, to career development, to art, to other things out there. And so that's one of my sort of big myths with that. One of the other things that I have with my experience, so I have, since I've moved from doing construction jobs explained, and which was kind of seen by WNET and Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and then my time with that was up, and so my local stations decided to switch into doing Idaho Jobs Explained. So now I focus on creating content for YouTube for all of Idaho's industries. I guess I could share some videos. I said, let me see if I can do this without awkwardly screwing this up here. Hold on one second. Thumbs up if you can actually see this, and you can see my page. Okay, cool. All right, I'm not showing anything weird. Good. I'll just show a little bit of the stuff that we sort of make here. Idaho is just full of opportunities, just waiting to be explored. That's why we created Idaho Jobs Explained. From healthcare to agriculture to building the world around us. Discover what it takes, meet the people who do it, and find out how you can get started. Explore the careers shaping our state. Your future is a lot closer than you think. Join us. Find your path right here in Idaho. So yeah, that's obviously our little trailer that we have. I'll show a little bit of, I won't show the whole thing, but I'll show a little bit of
this is Rubber Duck to Night Owl. We got four-wheelers clogging up the chicken coop. Requesting clearance to hammer down. Over. Yeah, breaker. This is Foxhound coming at you live from the gravel pit. We got Smoky Bears, Wiggle Wagons, and a full tank of optimism. How copy? I'm gonna be completely honest. I have no idea what I'm saying right now. This isn't even a CB radio. This is just a pack of Post-it notes. But fortunately, there are people out there who do know what they're doing. Hi, I'm Matthew from Idaho Jobs Explained, and this is Transportation. When we talk about transportation, we usually think about semi-trucks on the highway. But behind every truck is a driver, and behind every driver is training. Today we're in Emmett, Idaho, at Heritage Driving School, where students are learning how to earn their commercial driver's license, or CDL for short, and unlock careers that keep Idaho moving.
Pretty much the license to drive, operate these, big trucks. It opens up a huge array of jobs. You got tankers, side dumps, and you could do, possibilities are endless. The one-on-one. A lot of other truck driver schools have a whole bunch of people in the back just waiting to drive. Here it's just you and the trainer, and I think that's amazing.
Anyway, I'll stop that right there. I won't show you the whole thing. But just a little example of the sort of content that we make, which actually brings me to one of the things that I think that we have sort of discovered with integrating this sort of work that I've been doing in my station. One thing my station has really focused on at Idaho Public Television is really looking forward to the future, to what public media is going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And Mike spoke great to that, where it is one of those things where I think that the use of the internet, the use of social media, the use of these video platforms is going to be a very crucial part. And having someone like me on board into the department has, I think, been a great experiment. It is a great way to get their feet wet with trying to discover what works, what doesn't, what's how do we work with an algorithm? How do we work in these spaces? What sort of content can we create? And it is one of those things where, like, yeah, some things work, some things don't. I've definitely put out stuff that, like, in my heart of hearts, I thought was gonna just knock it out of the park, and then seen by nobody. And some things that are like, okay, here's a quick little thing we did, and then just, oh, great, that's what goes viral. But it is a great way to start that conversation with your audience, because your audience is no longer just in one space. They're no longer just on television. They're no longer just on the radio. They are in all sorts of platforms. And this is the best way, I think, to begin that conversation. So I will shut up from now. That'll be my spiel, but I'm happy to answer some questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Matthew. And we did have, before we get into some questions, because some of these questions are related to some topics that, so we had a comment in the chat with someone reaching out with another example that they would like to share. So Amber, would you like to see if we would be able to use that tool to bring Heather Reeson to talk about her experience working with an external influencer?
There we go. Welcome, Heather. Thanks for joining us.
And just so that the world doesn't think, that everybody that's watching doesn't think that this is an exclusively Wisconsin takeover, full disclosure, Heather does work with us at PBS Wisconsin. But she has a really great example to talk through of working with an external influencer here in Wisconsin who has a well-known following both in Wisconsin and across the Midwest and beyond. So I'd love to have you talk a little bit about that, Heather, before we get to some of these questions that people have around working with external influencers. So welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eric and Amber. I'm really excited to see this panel today and hear from everyone. It's very exciting. So I will talk very quickly about what we did last year at PBS Wisconsin. So we received a grant from ITVS for the documentary We Want the Funk. Most people probably aired it on their PBS stations. So with this grant, we had to promote it, and we really wanted to figure out how to reach new and younger audiences. Like, that is something as a station I know a lot of people are working on. And we thought, what a better way than something with funk music, do something fun. So we connected with our community engagement manager, Dulce Felicities. She was the one who really had this idea of connecting with an influencer. So we found someone here in Madison, Nate Marshall. He works for the university, but he's also an author. He has a lot of passion around hip hop music, poetry, arts, music, culture. So it was really just a great fit around this. So she was able to connect with him. We did pay a small fee for their work. But what was exciting is Nate was also thrilled to be part of this. He has a huge Instagram, Facebook following. So that was another way to get it out. He also partners with the university. So I know when she was thinking about who to do, not only a rad person who fits it, but somebody who has that social media following that would bring kind of those connections. So we scheduled with him around town different shoots, and we shot at local businesses and another way to bring more folks in from the community. So like a local record store, since we were talking about funk music. We also brought in a local DJ, which was another great way to connect our work with them and then their influencers and work. So we had Nate do some on-camera lines that we scripted to kind of set up what we were doing, but then we also did interview style to give him an opportunity to kind of talk about why this work was important to him and what it means to the greater broad of the community. What also was really fun is we did an event as kind of the culmination of everything. So we had a bunch of promos on Instagram, Facebook, and then we had this event that was a screening of a section of the movie and then a dance party after. So the reason we did a dance party, it's like, whoa, PBS dance party. Cool. Yeah. So we were trying to figure out a way again to kind of get a different audience, kind of bring folks in that might not realize, like, hey, PBS makes these really cool documentaries on history and things I might be interested in. So it was a huge success. We had a full house at a bar we partnered with here in town, which they've been super great. We've actually worked with them since. So continuing to build on those connections. And, in the end, what was really cool was, reaching those younger audiences. Like, the folks that were at the dance party was not like our usual core audience that we know at PBS Wisconsin, right? So a good way to meet new people. We got some new members out of it. We were able to work on our distribution. So more content specifically for Instagram, specifically for YouTube, specifically for Facebook, something that I know can be challenging sometimes because you're creating broadcast spots and then everything in between. We also were able to kind of strengthen a lot of those community connections with the different folks places we shot and all of that. And we really tried to drive action for people. So, hey, if you liked this, you would like that. So we had people on the floor at the event walking around like, hey, are you enjoying this? Scan this QR code, take this survey, sign up for the PBS emails, know what else we're doing. So overall, it was a really good, successful project. We hit a lot of our goals. We found it really helpful to work with an influencer. Like, it was cool to learn from, other people as well. So really great. Hopefully we can do it again sometime. I see that Amber popped a link in the chat. Thank you so much. And I'll also pop a link in the chat for some of the promos we made. What was really cool about the promo producers on the team, they had such a blast working on this too, because it was different than other work that we've done. So it really gave us the chance to kind of experiment creativity wise as well. We had an open call out for dancers in the town to come into our PBS Wisconsin studios, welcome them in, do some, dance routines for us, talk about why they love funk music. That really hit that, Gen Z's generation. So like that was folks that, were in the studios telling their friends, posting on their social medias. So just trying to find as many facets as we could to get the word out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather, for joining in. And if you are willing to stick around, maybe some of these questions will be relevant to you as well. We did have a question from Nicole, and I don't know if anyone has any experience on this, but also if anyone in the chat does, feel free to note or to chime in. She says, say you bring an influencer on board and they become a liability to remain connected to the public media brand. What are some next steps or items to consider?
Um, obviously you can't plan for everything, things will happen. I will say when we did bring in outside influencers, we were pretty diligent on like, doing what we could to like, granted we were looking for cooking and baking influencers, so the risks were smaller. You're not going to find too many problematic bakers, but but yeah, that's something you kind of would, I guess, consider going into it. Like, does this person seem like the kind of online personality that would bring in any untoward eyes? And kind of a case by case thing. We thankfully haven't run into that kind of situation yet, but I can't speak for what management would do, but if it were up to me, I would say it would just like you would with any contractor or even employee, it's just you deal with it as based on what the situation is. And
I think that I think that there are, it really is that due diligence, and I think that that's one of the benefits that public media has in working in a space like this, is that we rarely make knee-jerk decisions. And so, it's very rare for, we're not just going to chase popularity for the sake of popularity without doing that due diligence to say, does this person and their public persona and what they have done and the things that they have said, does that align with the values and mission and goals of public media? And quite often, we can broaden the scope of what public media feels like to do that. But it's going to be hopefully a rare instance that we would do that, where there would be problems on the back end. I think that there is additional due diligence though that is required anytime that you're working with and we're all familiar with this, right? And not just in digital media work, but public media shows have had hosts for a number of years. Documentaries have had hosts. There's been instances I know where where say somebody that you tap to host or present a documentary now all of a sudden is running for office, and that might not be something that is controversial, but you need to be careful then about what it means if you're going to represent that documentary in the midst of an election or something like that. And so those are things that we we have examples of that in Wisconsin, where probably 20 some years ago we had Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Presenting a documentary on Earth Day, with a lot of the conservation work that he was doing at the time, and there was no issue at all with that, and there's not potentially an issue at this point with that. But when he was running for president, we had to be really thoughtful about, is that something that we program on Earth Day? Is that something that we share out with our audiences? Because of that connection there. So I think that due diligence is a place that really sets public media up, and that thoughtfulness sets us up for success in this space. But like Mike said, you're never going to avoid all of those situations. And so, just using, quality public relations and being aware of what's happening around the world and in your communities is important as well.
And on a,
Oh,
I was gonna
yeah.
say real quick, on a personal side of that too, like, and this is something that I've talked about before in other you know so outside of, before I came in to working here, I mean, I still do, I do stand-up comedy, and so like there was a conversation of when I started doing the social media and getting into the video and side of things, and essentially being our initial face for our social media. There was a conversation that had to be had of making sure that like there were clear lines drawn, because it wouldn't take too much for someone to, and my role in our social media has since changed a lot, since our now that we have our footprint is settled. But there are those conversations that have to be had, and it just falls back to you know trusting your people, trusting your team, and just making sure to do the homework, and but you can only plan ahead for so much.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where nothing has truly changed. Sort of what Eric and Mike are talking about is these are the sort of conversations that have kind of always existed. Yes, due diligence. Obviously, you can get a pretty quick idea if someone is getting. If you're working with an influencer who got famous for just having just totally off the wall content, then usually that's pretty obvious. And again, you can't plan if if all of a sudden this person goes hard into making like flat Earth, material. You're like, well, I couldn't see that coming. But it's also one of those things where working in the jobs explained. It's one of those things where talking about these issues you're talking about people have very strong political opinions and other opinions because say something like my wheelhouse jobs, yeah, that's important to everyone. That's very important. That's very important to the political spectrum. That's very important to people's philosophies, regardless of where you're coming from. So I think a lot of the work that I try to do is, it's not that I can't be apolitical, because jobs is one of the most political things you could talk about, but I think that it is also about finding the very the nuggets that we all agree on is that people should have opportunities. People should have, livelihoods. People should have certain things. And I think that it is finding that those type of issues to speak to when you are creating whatever content that you're creating and speaking to that and having them speak to that.
I think another thing that is just important to do is to be willing to have those types of conversations. I know that there's been, instances at our station where it's not even shows that we produce, but say local shows that we obtain that, where a host will, on their personal platforms will, make a statement that someone in our staff, a staff member would not make, or a overt political statement that is something that we might not we likely would not make in the course of our work. And I know that there have been conversations with some of those staffs, with some of those hosts along the way, where we're not going to tell them what to say. It's an independent production. It is what it is. But the conversations that we've had is, hey, please, if you're willing to be aware of what that might say about public media and your connection to public media, when you're making those statements, when you're being yourself in those social media spaces. And I've observed that those conversations have been really welcomed, and quite often are responded to with a, "Oh yeah, wow, I'm really glad that you made me think of it in that scope because, I'm just a TV host in my mind and not realizing that there's a specialness to being a public TV host." And so those conversations have always gone really well, at least the ones that I've been privy to. And often the person having that, being part of that conversation is usually really grateful for that reminder. And we have to remind ourselves that, we have these conversations all the time within our station around what it means to be, a public media staff member. And, maybe having those conversations proactively as you're bringing people on is valuable. And we can't just make the assumption that people will always connect those dots. Mike?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of what you said. I think one example that I think is actually, I'm kind of mad I didn't think of this earlier, is Rick Steves. Rick Steves, if he were new today, he'd be an influencer. He'd be a travel influencer. He'd be one of those guys on Instagram. He is one of those guys on Instagram, traveling the world, posting about it, showing you where to get good deals, where to go see things, all things like that. Rick Steves endorsed Kamala Harris for president. You know, that was something that PBS had to navigate in general. Um, that's a very large example. Rick Steves is Rick Steves, obviously. Um, but I think that kind of lends itself to that bigger conversation that we've been having in general of what influencers are, what role they can and do play in public media, and you know what to do if they choose to go that route of, yeah, I'm public media, but I'm also a person, and this is my platform. So, you know,
Yeah.
I don't really have an end for that. It's just there's an example, and
Yeah.
so it's not like we've never had to navigate that before, just on a different scale.
Yeah. And also to speak to that as well is not it is one of those things where yes, it is absolutely something that we've dealt with before, but also to be very honest, not to scare or fearmonger. It is important to note that like we do certainly live in an age where there are people looking at your organization maliciously, or that are coming to you to uh be like, oh, look at what they just said. There are people online who are doing that, and it is easier nowadays to clip something that you have put out or that you have produced or said, and have that itself potentially go viral. Again, it's not something that I want to necessarily say is something you should be up all night all the time worried about. But yeah, that is absolutely something in this day and age you do need to consider.
I think in line with that, and I'll tee Heather up a little bit on this. I know that there have been organizations that will, and PBS has even done this, right, where they like say will send out their PBS holiday sweaters to people in hopes that they'll make videos that they'll post on their social media, et cetera, talking about it, and that's great. And obviously, that's not hosted on PBS's platforms, but there is risk there. But we have an example even recently where there's a fellow that you may or may not know, depending on how close your epicenter is to Wisconsin, named Charlie Barons, who's a very well-known local influencer and comedian and et cetera. And he got tapped by our station to voice a traditional TV documentary around Bucky Badger. And Heather and her team worked with Charlie then to create some really, really fun interstitials that we knew would have a lot of really great engagement. Um, I really like that angle where you're working with an influencer, but you're still maintaining some, production connection and production control, especially of the stuff that is appearing on your channels. And I think that that's a really great example with that Heather and her team were able to pull together of how that can work while still being of the organization.
Let's not forget that George Carlin did a voice on Thomas the Tank Engine.
If I could jump in with another question here, I feel like this is fantastic conversation. Carrie has a really great question that I'd be curious to hear all of your perspectives on. It's are PBS stations hiring slash partnering with influencers outside of their own staff? It sounds like yes, that's happening. And if so, how does that fee structure work? What's a typical fee? What is a typical work look like, and that scope of work? How do you all think about that?
I ask HR, honestly. That's above
Uh,
me.
Yeah, I don't know. The example that I just shared, Heather, with Charlie, I don't know the details behind that. Was the participation in your videos built into his contract for the other work that we did, or did we have to do a separate arrangement?
Well, a little bit of both, actually. So we did build in the original contract that we wanted him to do something promotionally. And then this was a good example, and we learned a lot from this of why we need the right people in the room because it should have been built in better, and it wasn't for the social media aspect because then it was, hey, we're partnering with this person that has millions of followers, and mostly everyone in Wisconsin would know who he is, right? So yeah, we did, and then we did have some of it built in, and we did go back and ask then for more participation to do some extra videos, and it all worked out wonderfully in the end. We also had a couple issues with like has like an agency that is in LA, and they were quite not responsive to us as maybe some folks that we were working with around here is. It did come up though with the political comments, and it's come up with a couple of the other talent we've worked with. We haven't pulled anything yet, but if it was something like completely egregious, we did talk about like, okay, then we'd have to pull it. But at the time, everything was posted. Luckily, none of that was going on.
In the past, for us, it's usually just been like we've given tickets. Like I said, we've had events. It's what we'll give you and your folks free tickets to the event, and usually that in and of itself, because a lot of the America's Test Kitchen, like those weren't cheap. Like a lot of the times, that in and of itself, like because for them they got to go to the event, and they got to go do the photo op as well. So like a lot of times that in and of itself perks a lot of times for these folks are enough to get them on board. If the dollar sign is throwing up caution flags for you, see if there's a way that you can maybe just use perks to motivate them into whatever relationship you're trying to form.
I have a question that actually I like and would like to answer if that's cool. Josephine asks, question for everyone. How do you think in terms of style and content? Do stations need to be willing to adapt on social media platforms? How do we do more than regurgitate broadcast clips onto social? This is a really good question that actually our station has been wrestling with as well. Okay, so a couple of things that I will say is every time you create a piece of short form video content, it needs to provide its own value completely by itself. If they never see the other documentary that it's in reference to, if they never go to the event, the piece that you put out needs to provide some sort of value, be it entertainment value, educational value, inspirational value. Just as if they just see it by itself and nothing else, that needs to be something it can do by itself, because people know what an ad is. People see something and they have been trained their entire life to sniff out something that's just an ad for something else. And it's not necessarily bad. It's just that you are missing a great opportunity to create something new that provides its own value. So in the sense that, yes, if you have a clip that you are piecing out from another production you're doing, look as if is like, okay, is this a movie trailer, or is this a little snippet of something that if they just only ever see this in their entire life, we've put something out in value into someone's life. And also there are a couple things to consider as well working in different stations, is that when you create new content, there's a line of like, I don't want to say you don't have to make it well. That's not at all what I'm saying. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the complete Emmy winning, like drone shots into soft focus, because people actually like authenticity. And there's a little bit of having that rawness, having that more just spirit and energy over like the most tightly produced little piece of video will go further. You'll notice that a lot of great people and content you see is literally just someone in their bedroom, because they've managed to create something engaging just there, just that. And it's not that I'm telling you to not put effort into it, but just let it free yourself to focus more on the energy of the type of content that you're creating.
I think the term you're looking for is less polished. That's the
Yes.
one I like to tell. I like to. It's not that it doesn't have to look good. It's just that it doesn't have to look perfect.
Yes.
Just there's a. This is a little bit off topic. There's a film that I'm a fan of called The Reduced Shakespeare Company, where a group of actors do the complete works of William Shakespeare in one 1 hour thing. And they say, well, I don't know if we can do Hamlet justice. He says, we don't have to do Hamlet justice. We just have to do Hamlet.
Yes, I love that show. Yes, 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 yes.
So that's the way I like to look at, like, when it comes to short form social media video. It doesn't always have to be your A+ material. It just has to be, for lack of a better term, good enough. You can do high. I'm gonna give you two examples of what I mean here. Is you can find a way to use the content you're already producing to produce extra content in the meantime, but also they'll find there's a weird fun and authenticity, like you're talking about, that comes with the less produced stuff. The first I'm going to show you is we have a show in Cincinnati called Showcase, which is our host sits down with community leaders and figureheads and has very personal conversations with them. But our production team does a series called This or That with them prior to recording, where they literally ask them just rapid fire this or that questions on really innocuous, just unimportant things. So I'm gonna show you that one first. Can you guys, I don't know, please tell me. I think you get. So, all right, here we go.
Creative brainstorming or careful planning?
Creative brainstorming, no question.
Tradition or innovation?
I like a tradition.
Inspiring creativity or ensuring stability?
I'm in an inspiring creativity sort of mode right now as we create things for 2026.
Local restaurant or a home-cooked meal?
Local restaurant. My wife Becky is a tremendous cook, but a night at Via Vita is always wonderful.
Historic architecture or modern design?
Definitely historic architecture.
Book or podcast?
Definitely book. Try to read about 60 books a year.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee all day long.
So those are something we do. Just we every time there's a show, they cut those together for me. Kaylin, who is our one of our great editors, cuts those together, or Mike, and they send. We have 3 mics here. They send them to me, and those go up. So those are great social content. Now, these other one, I'm going to show you something that I make with our programming director, Joan, and every month we try to find some program or theme of program we're having, and just put some focus on it that we want people to watch. And sometimes we pull folks from around the office, and in this case, we pulled someone from our membership team to talk about it.
Calling all pet lovers, join us for a new behind-the-scenes special, All Creatures Great and Small, Cheers to the Years. Explore each of the characters, human and animal, and revisit their loves, losses, triumphs, and their joys. Speaking of pets, Christine has information about our pet club.
Help support programs like All Creatures Great and Small. For a sustaining membership of $15 a month, up to 4 of your pets can become official members of the station and receive a welcome packet and a bandana.
Be sure to scan the QR code for more information about Pet Club. CET, your home for all creatures great.
My internet sucks. Okay. But it's been and those, every time we've done one of those, like the numbers on those increase every time. And those have been a great way for us to, going back to what I brought up, like the idea of you yourself being the influencer for your own station, and creating those, just here's just us, it's just our programming person and a membership person in a conference room, no bells and whistles, just talking about cool programming we have, and cool stuff we're doing with the pet club community stuff. And that took an hour, like that took an hour to shoot, edit, and get signed off on. So
Yeah.
little things.
And I think
I
that thinking behind it is, that just that little bit of thinking and the doing. I know that Heather's done some really great examples of that recently, where she's got her whole crew there for the video promo crew. Why not grab the person that they're talking to make a little social media video there in the moment while it's set up, and you got the lights, and in a way, for our social media audiences, Heather has now become an influencer because of that.
Yeah, no,
yeah,
that
oh,
we just say
sorry.
have fun. No, I was just gonna say that, like when people are talking about fun, we just say have fun. And then I tell our folks, I'm like, what and done for social? And they're like, wow, really? So it's kind of a nice, a fresh change of pace when you go through like either reading scripts or interviewing folks. It's just like, let's do one and done and have some fun. And there's no scripts and casual. And people really like it too. So it's a good way to like also build those connections.
Yeah, we also had a good success with the We Want the Funk, and creating promos for that, and working with local sort of arts organizations and people. Because again, it's one of those very flowery terms that you sort of hear, but social media is a conversation. And that's how you should be thinking of it. And what I mean by that sort of flowery phrase is your goal is to connect directly with people who talk back to you. There are comment sections for a reason. They don't have comments sections in books or in movies. These people can talk back to you, and you can talk back to them. And you also can talk back with other organizations. One of the greatest things about working in social media is we can work very quickly, we can very speedily. And I personally have made connections with so many different organizations and other groups and arts organizations, businesses that now can say, hey, I know Idaho Public Television because I worked with that one guy for that one silly, stupid video. And now I have a connection with them. And it's just a great way to actually do one of the great things of public media, which is engage with the public.
This is great. I think I'm going to try to stick in one last question before we wrap here, as we're reaching the top of the hour. I love the conversation, and the energy behind this is really exciting. Just to get to one question about metrics and numbers, I'm going to try to kind of merge these questions together. Related to how you determine who to work with. That could be, outside influencers, other partner organizations like you were talking about, Matthew. Are there metrics you're looking for in this space around followers, engagement rates? And then, are there any conversion ratios as well, as far as, engaging people and then turning them into members or future partners? What are you all thinking around those spaces?
I mean, when we were first looking for ours, again, we haven't done it enough. We're still kind of figuring out what that kind of standard operating procedure is going to look like. You know, it's kind of a play it by ear situation. I feel like right now, with since a lot of us are still dipping our toe into it, as it were. Um, you know, Social media is so fluid. It's hard to put like an actual hard number on it when you're dealing with things on a local level. Because on the one hand, 1,000 followers is a lot for one person, but is not a lot for another. So I guess it would really just depend on what it is your overall goal is, with like why are you looking to get the influencer involved or the blogger involved? Like what is, yeah, I guess it would just depend on what it is you're looking to do. It's not a great answer, but
And I
No,
know,
yeah.
yeah, go
Oh,
ahead,
I was
Matthew.
about to say, it's sort of, I think that is as good as answer as I have as well. It's really more about, yeah, kind of like what you said, is like, who are you trying to talk to? Are you if you are bringing in someone, are they connected to that baking community, that arts community, that industry community? Do they have a voice that you want to bring in? And so you can also talk with their people and they can talk with yours. As far as hard numbers, yeah, it's, it is a new world. I wish I could tell you it's like, oh yeah, you need this many followers and this many views and this many. I truly wish I could say that, but I can't.
Well, and we're in an industry that has long had set metrics, and these are still all new, especially as we are, as Mike said, dipping our toe. And so I think a real key here is less about the what are you accomplishing and more about um, building those base points so that you have an understanding to see what you need to build that base point now, because we just don't even know what that is, and then you can start to see comparatively, like, oh, this one did better than that one, this one did. And so we're not only are you building a new way of a new form of media for our audiences, you're also needing to build the new way to report on that and to analyze that impact. I think that's the key, is just don't miss that opportunity to set that baseline and to understand that baseline, but also don't get discouraged if that baseline isn't as high as you think it should be in this moment.
When we were hiring for our jobs explain person, I was in on those interviews. One of the things that I brought up with each interview was that, social media it's kind of like having a football game where the goalposts are moving every single day. The goalpost never stays in one place. You can have, this is going to sound cliche, but social media really is less about the destination and more about the journey, because you're never actually going to reach a final you're gonna promote this one thing. Okay, cool. Then what? Like there's not like a final end level. Oh, we beat the game. It's so that it's about being able to adjust, like I said, adjust expectations, manage expectations, and adjust and manage your goals as you go along, because you might think you're setting lofty and then you might completely overtake it, or you might set high and come up short. But kind of with the way social media is, everyone's going to forget about it the next day. You just move on to the next thing. I have given workshops to comedians in town for marketing, and one thing I've told them is that the internet has kind of leveled the playing field. It used to be that marketing and promotion was all about right place, right time. Well, the right place is the internet and on social media, and the right time's kind of all the time now. So
Yeah, and it goes back to the whole thing of a conversation of like having a conversation is never never done. Like, it's never like, yes, I've had such a good marriage that I've now succeeded and now I never have to talk to my wife ever again. No, it is just it's constantly moving, and it's just your voice that you have to say.
Oh, it's a great note to end on. We're never done. We'll always keep continuing the conversation. And with that note, I just wanted to extend a big thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Heather, for jumping in. And of course, a big thank you to Eric and the Marketing Communications PLC. I'll pass it to you, Eric, in a sec. I'll just put in a little plug from Public Media Innovators. We will be hosting our April webinar on April 23rd. And the topic will be looking at leveraging newsletters as a strategic audience growth, engagement, potentially revenue growth engagement tool. So we're going to be looking at some of the creative work that's happening around the system around newsletters. But thank you all for joining. I'll hand it over to Eric to wrap us up.
Absolutely. And thank you again to all of our presenters and all of our participants. What great questions. And I hope this was valuable. Please connect with the Marketing and Communications PLC. We hold meetups on various topics every other month. And we welcome people both within the marketing and communication space and any other space who can find value in the topics that we're discussing there. So please do that. And an extra plug to just, take time to explore the NIDA website. There's so much great stuff there and so many great resources for all of us who are trying to make it work at local stations. So thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your week.